Thank you all for being here today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the families who have joined us here today. Many of them have lost a loved one or had a loved one seriously impacted by the limousine crashes in either Schoharie or Cutchogue, and all of them have channeled their grief into advocacy. I want to recognize those family members that are here with us today. We have Linda King, who lost 4 daughters, Amy, Allison, Abigail, and Mary, and 3 son-in-laws in the Schoharie crash. We have Bethany Nacco, Linda's daughter-in-law, Jameson Ott Carpenter, the best friend of the 4 daughters, Kevin Cushing, the father of a crash victim, Patrick, who worked in the IT department here in the New York State Senate, as well as Janet Steenberg, who lost her sons Richard and Axel in the Schoharie crash. We have Nancy DeMonte, the mother of crash survivor Joelle DeMonte, Paul and Susan Schulman, the parents of crash victim Brittany Schulman, Susan Arundel, the mother of the crash survivor Alicia Arundel, Mindy and Howard Grabina, the parents of crash victim Amy Grabina, and Felicia Baruch, the mother of the crash victim Lauren Baruch. I want to thank each and every one of them once again for not only being here today, but by channeling their energy to advance this extraordinarily important package of limousine safety legislation that will be passing today in the Senate. I want to, of course, thank our incredible Majority Leader, Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Without her leadership, we wouldn't be seeing so many of these progressive reforms making their way to the Senate floor like the ones we're here to discuss today. And lastly, to my colleagues in the Democratic Conference who've joined us here today, their partnership on these bills speaks for itself. We have Senator Breslin, Senator Gorin, Senator Kaplan, Senator May, and Senator Liu, who have joined us, and others who will be making their way. Today, the Senate will pass 9 monumental reforms designed to ensure the safety of all New Yorkers is taken into consideration and guaranteed when they choose to ride in a limousine or for-hire vehicle. From requiring seatbelts in every vehicle carrying 9 or more passengers to mandating commercial driver's licenses and drug and alcohol testing for drivers for for-hire vehicles to increasing criminal penalties for drivers who break the law while on the road, we're taking significant steps to ensure safety measures are firmly in place when anyone steps into one of these vehicles. We're also making sure that any vehicle that shouldn't be on the road in the first place is immobilized by the Department of Transportation immediately. And when New Yorkers do experience an issue with a limousine or a for-hire vehicle, that they should be able to easily report that concern, which is why we're creating not just a hotline, but an app and a website where they can do so. The list of changes we're making is vast, but we also know that there's always more work to do, which is why we're creating a task force that will further examine current limousine regulations and safety training programs and evaluate the need for rear view cameras, airbags, speed restriction devices, as well as the number of miles or years a stretch limousine can be on the road. When I was appointed to the chair as Senate Transportation Committee this year, this legislation became one of my top priorities as chairman, and I can tell you that the Transportation Committee immediately began discussions on this topic from day one. My colleagues and I were proud to work hand in hand with these families to create these bills to ensure that no New Yorkers have to suffer the way that they have. As I mentioned, our work is never done. But we believe that with today's reforms, we're taking a significant step forward, and we're eager to see these bills passed today in the Senate. As we head into the final weeks of the legislative session, we strongly urge our colleagues in the Assembly to do right by these families and bring these bills to the Assembly floor immediately for a vote as well. Any questions?
Senator, what's your sense of the Assembly passing John Nasson How much of this were you unable to get in the budget? Obviously, there were a number of proposals that the governor put forth that some of them got in, some didn't.
Well, let me start by thanking the governor for his leadership in advancing this important initiative and a number of the items that we began talking about earlier in the year. We are moving through the legislative process right now, and we're moving aggressively. And the next 2 to 3 weeks are obviously a tipping point for many initiatives across the state. We believe very strongly that because of the family's input, because of the family's drive, and aggressive endorsement of the legislation that we are enacting here today, that we are taking monumental steps for safety for those that utilize limousines across the state of New York. No one should have to get in a limousine and be concerned about whether or not they're going to be returned home safely. The legislation that we're enacting today improves immensely the safety of limousines across the state of New York. It strengthens the industry standards, and quite frankly, it sets a precedent for the rest of the nation to follow suit. The crash in Schoharie was the largest loss of life in nearly a decade since the crash of Flight 3407. 20 people lost their lives. The crash in Cutchogue, where 4 young women lost their lives and 4 were forever impacted physically and emotionally. These incidents happened while going out and celebrating life's changing moments, birthdays and weddings, going to wineries. The prom season is upon us. The wedding season is upon us. We have an obligation to these families and to all residents of the state of New York and, quite frankly, this nation, to improve the safety standards when an individual hires a limousine, to do the right thing, so they're not drinking and driving, so that they're obeying the law, so that they can negotiate their day and their evenings safely. That didn't happen in these horrific crashes in Schoharie and Cutchogue. We have to prevent that from ever happening again, and I believe that this package of bills that we're advancing today will forever have a positive impact on the safety of limousines in the state of New York.
You know, the governor had initially proposed banning these stretch limos altogether. Was that a step too far, you thought, in your package here?
Again, that was walked back almost immediately within the budget negotiation. What we are doing here today is putting forward aggressive legislation that will improve the safety standards immensely.
During the committee hearing in May, there's a lot of talk about the disconnect between some of the information at DMV and how that's shared with DOT and back and forth, and how this Schoharie company was able to manipulate the DMV process. Did you ever consider that, or are you hoping that gets done as part of the task force?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, that crash is still an ongoing investigation, so there are some details within the Schoharie crash that still have to come out to address some of the intricacies of that. That being said, we not only have a task force that will take a look at all of the other initiatives that may be proposed, not just up to this point, but in the future, but also we are creating a website, a reporting mechanism where if there are problems and there are bad actors and there are individuals that are skirting the law or putting people in harm's way because they're not following the safety standards that we are going to put forward here today, that they're held accountable, that there will be a reporting mechanism where the DOT can come in and immediately immobilize, whether it's a boot or an impounding of these vehicles that should not be on the road. They'll be taken off the road immediately.
Several speakers mentioned that the job is not done yet. People won't rest until everything's done. What isn't done? What still needs to get passed?
Well, so this is a series of 9 initiatives there is going to be a task force that is part of one of these initiatives that will look at things like a speed governor, that will look at things like airbag implementation and other initiatives that may not be addressed in this package here today that need further research and input before they're implemented in the next week or two. But we believe that the bills that we have is extremely robust and aggressive package of bills that will address limousine safety from a global perspective.
Is there funding included in these bills, particularly like the app, the one that would require DOT to have an app and a hotline, things like that?
Any funding that has to do with an application or website is extremely minimal, and we believe that the Department of Transportation will be able to implement that without a further need for funding. If there is a funding gap, that will be addressed in the next budget.
How about as far
Final
as,
question.
how about as far as staffing for that hotline? I know that sometimes DOT is already stretched thin to make sure that these limos are being checked properly. What are you planning on doing for staffing for that hotline and making sure that there's enough resources for them to go out and check this?
Once again, this is an initial set of bills. If there are any funding initiatives that need to be addressed within the confines of the budget, we will absolutely do so.
All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.